Have you ever found yourself in a conversation, watching the light in people's eyes fade as you delve into a topic that truly fascinates you? Have you ever felt a strange, invisible wall rise between you and others the moment you move beyond surface-level chatter? This feeling of disconnection, this sense of being an observer rather than a participant, is not a personal failing or social misstep. It is a profound and often painful consequence of seeing the world with a little too much clarity. Society, despite its claims to value progress and knowledge, has always maintained a deep-seated, almost primal fear of the truly intelligent mind. Why is it that the very quality that pushes humanity forward is so often met with resistance, suspicion, and isolation? The answer is far more complex than simple jealousy or misunderstanding. It taps into the very core of human psychology, into the fragile architecture of our egos and our innate need for social harmony. When you encounter someone who is physically stronger, you might feel a sense of admiration or even inspiration. When you meet someone who possesses great wealth, you may feel envy, but it doesn't typically force you to question your own worth. These are external attributes, qualities that exist outside the core of who you are. But intellectual superiority operates on an entirely different plane. It doesn't just resent new information. It acts as a mirror, reflecting back the limitations, the unexamined beliefs, and the cognitive comfort zones of everyone it encounters. This phenomenon, which we can call the mirror effect, is a root of the discomfort. A deeply thoughtful person, often without saying a word, can make others feel inadequate. Their presence alone is a silent challenge to the status quo of thought. It forces an uncomfortable self-awareness that most people are conditioned to avoid at all costs. The mind that questions everything implicitly questions your asterisk mind, and the human ego, designed for self-preservation, rarely forgives such a trespass. It's not an act of aggression from the intelligent individual, but it is perceived as one by those who have built their sense of self on a foundation of unchallenged certainties. To truly grasp why intelligence incites this unique form of fear, we must dissect how our minds categorize and react to different forms of perceived superiority. Physical prowess can be contextualized as protective. We might see a strong person as a potential ally or leader. Material success can be rationalized as a result of luck or hard work, something to aspire to or dismiss. These qualities, however impressive, do not fundamentally challenge our inner world, our personal narrative of who we are and how we understand reality. They exist in the realm of the tangible, the external, the other. Intelligence, however, is internal. It is inextricably linked to our identity, our consciousness, and our sense of agency in the world. We define ourselves through our thoughts, our frameworks for understanding, and the stories we tell ourselves about how things work. When someone demonstrates a capacity for deeper, more nuanced, or more critical thinking, it can feel like a direct assault on this internal architecture. It suggests that our own understanding might be incomplete, flawed, or based on false premises. Instead of inspiring curiosity, this realization often triggers a defensive posture. The ego goes into lockdown, not because a deep thinker is arrogant, but because their very existence introduces a destabilizing element of doubt into a carefully constructed worldview. This is a silent, undeclared war waged in countless social interactions every day. It's why throughout history, the figures who pushed the boundaries of human thought were not welcomed with open arms but were pushed to the margins. Their insights were not just a challenge to prevailing ideas. They were a challenge to individual and collective egos. And the ego, when threatened, will deploy a formidable arsenal of defense mechanisms, ridicule, dismissal, and ostracism to protect itself from the discomfort of self-examination. Think back on your own life. Recall a time you tried to share a complex idea or subtle observation during a casual get-together. You might have been met with blank stares, a quick change of subject, or even a condescending remark intended to simplify and dismiss your point. This isn't necessarily a sign of malice. It's a symptom of a mind retreating to safety. When confronted with intellectual depth, many people's cognitive systems default to a mode of self-preservation. The brain, an organ optimized for energy conservation, finds it easier to reject a complex new idea than to expend the considerable effort required to integrate it. Curiosity is mentally expensive. Dismissal is cheap. This is why you see charismatic speakers with simple, emotionally resonant messages amass huge followings, while nuanced thinkers who embrace complexity often struggle to find an audience. Society instinctively values confidence over competence and certainty over curiosity. This creates a deeply unsettling paradox for the intelligent individual. The more they dedicate themselves to pursuing truth, uncovering hidden connections, and understanding the world in its full, messy complexity, the more they find themselves disconnected from the very society they are a part of. The mirror they hold up doesn't just show others their limitations. It reveals a society that prefers the comfort of shared illusions over the isolating burden of difficult truths. The rejection is not personal, but systemic. It is a fundamental consequence of a world that rewards conformity more than it does clarity. Modern neuroscience provides a biological basis for this social phenomenon, revealing that our fear of intellectual superiority is not just a psychological quirk, but a hardwired neurological response. Studies using functional MRI scans have shown that when individuals perceive themselves to be intellectually inferior in a social situation, their amygdala, the brain's ancient threat detection center, becomes highly active. This is the same region that lights up when we face physical danger, like encountering a predator. In neurological terms, your brain can interpret a deeply intelligent person's challenging idea with the same alarm it would a genuine threat to your survival. But why would an idea trigger a primal fear response? The answer lies buried in our evolutionary history. For tens of thousands of years, human survival was not contingent on being the most brilliant individual in the tribe, but on being the most integrated. Our ancestors lived and died by their ability to maintain social cohesion. Being accepted by the group meant access to resources, protection from predators, and mating opportunities. Conversely, being ostracized or rejected by the tribe was effectively a death sentence. An isolated human was a vulnerable human. Consequently, our brains evolved to be exquisitely sensitive to anything that might threaten our social standing. We are biologically programmed to prioritize social acceptance, often over objective truth. When a highly intelligent person enters a group, they are, by their very nature, a disruptive force. They challenge established norms, question collective beliefs, and disrupt the comfortable equilibrium of the group dynamic. This unconsciously triggers the tribe's defense mechanisms. The group perceives a deep thinker not as an asset, but as a potential threat to the stability and safety of the collective. This explains why so many intelligent people feel perpetually on the outside looking in. It's not necessarily a lack of social skills, but the fact that their very way of thinking marks them as different in a world that is biologically wired to favor sameness. A fascinating study conducted a few years ago further illuminated this dynamic, finding that the perceived threat of a deep thinker is highly context-dependent. In one-on-one interactions, individuals felt significantly less intimidated by an intellectual peer. However, when placed in a group setting, the threat response spiked dramatically. In a group, social hierarchy and status become paramount. People are no longer just reacting to the intelligence itself. They are reacting to how that intelligence positions them relative to others. If an individual feels that a deep thinker's insights might diminish their own social standing or make them appear less competent in front of their peers, they are far more likely to engage in defensive behaviors like undermining, ridiculing, or excluding them. This is why many intellectuals find their most rewarding conversations in private, intimate settings, yet feel completely exhausted and alienated by large social gatherings. The social calculus of a group environment inherently works against them. This biological predisposition is then amplified by a series of well-documented cognitive biases that stack the deck against intellectual novelty. The Dunning-Kruger effect, for instance, creates a perfect storm of misunderstanding. Individuals with low competence in a subject often dramatically overestimate their knowledge, while highly competent individuals tend to underestimate theirs. This leads to frustrating scenarios where those who know the least speak with the most certainty, confidently dismissing the nuanced perspectives of those who know the most. Furthermore, our brains are governed by a powerful status quo bias, a natural preference for the familiar over the unknown. New, complex ideas require significant mental energy to process and can create a sense of cognitive dissonance if they conflict with our existing beliefs. The brain's path of least resistance is to simply reject the new information to maintain its current state of equilibrium. This is closely related to the backfire effect, a phenomenon where, when presented with evidence that contradicts their core beliefs, people often don't just reject the evidence. They double down on their original belief, holding it even more strongly than before. A deep thinker presenting a challenging truth is not seen as offering enlightenment, but as launching an attack that must be repelled. In our current digital age, these cognitive biases are being put on steroids. Social media platforms are not designed to foster deep, reasoned discourse. They are engineered to maximize engagement. Their algorithms have learned that the most effective way to do this is by appealing to our most primal emotions: outrage, tribalism, and validation. Nuanced, complex arguments are algorithmically disadvantaged. They are too long, require too much cognitive effort, and don't fit neatly into a viral soundbite or 280-character limit. As a result, our information ecosystems increasingly favor shallow, emotionally charged content over thoughtful analysis, creating vast echo chambers where critical thinking goes to die. This digital environment makes the deep thinker's task nearly impossible. How do you communicate a profound, multi-layered idea when the entire system is designed to reward its oversimplified, distorted, or emotionally manipulative counterpart? The result is society that is becoming increasingly fragmented and resistant to intellectual challenge, making the isolation of the deep thinker more acute than ever before. The rejection they face is not just social. It is a multi-layered phenomenon rooted in our biology, amplified by our psychology, and institutionalized by our technology. Understanding these forces doesn't eliminate the loneliness, but it does offer crucial insight. The problem is not with you, but with the very structure of the world you are trying to understand. If modern science explains the how of society's resistance to intelligence, then the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer provides a devastatingly honest why. Long before brain scans and cognitive bias studies, Schopenhauer diagnosed the human condition with brutal clarity, arguing that a high degree of intelligence is not a gift to be celebrated, but a burden that fundamentally alienates an individual from their peers. Unlike his more optimistic contemporaries, Schopenhauer saw intelligence not as a tool for achieving happiness, but as a lens that reveals the inherent suffering and absurdity of existence, making true happiness all but impossible. At the heart of his philosophy is the concept of the will, a blind, irrational, and ceaseless striving that animates all of life. For Schopenhauer, the vast majority of humanity is enslaved by this force, which he called the will to live. People are driven by a relentless cycle of desire, for pleasure, for comfort, for status, for survival. They live their lives on a treadmill of wanting, getting, and wanting again, rarely stopping to question the nature of the treadmill itself. This pursuit of gratification, he argued, is a default state of human consciousness. It is a life lived in service of instinct, not intellect. However, the highly intelligent individual operates on a different frequency. Through their capacity for deep reflection and objective observation, they can begin to transcend the blind dictates of the will to live. They develop what could be called a will to truth, an insatiable, almost compulsive need to understand reality as it is, not as they wish it to be. This creates a fundamental and irreconcilable schism between them and the rest of society. While the average person seeks comfort and actively avoids inconvenient truths, the deep thinker seeks truth even when it leads to profound discomfort, pain, and isolation. This divergence manifests in nearly every aspect of life. Where most people find fulfillment in social rituals, entertainment, and the accumulation of material goods, the deep thinker often sees these as mere distractions, sophisticated mechanisms designed to numb us to the deeper, more unsettling questions of existence. Schopenhauer believed that the more a person understands the machinery of human nature, the more difficult it becomes for them to participate in the charade of everyday social life. They see through the polite facades, the status games, and the subtle manipulations that underpin most human interactions. Think of a typical social gathering. It is largely composed of small talk, performative opinions, and a tacit agreement not to broach any subject that might cause genuine discomfort. The deep thinker, who craves authenticity and meaningful exchange, finds this environment suffocating. They are a person starving for substance in a world that offers only confection. This isn't a matter of arrogance. It's a matter of cognitive incompatibility. Their mind is wired to deconstruct, to analyze, to seek the first principles, while the social world is built on a foundation of unexamined assumptions and shared fictions. Schopenhauer also saw the futility in the desires that drive most people. The relentless pursuit of wealth, power, and social validation appeared to him as a tragic, pointless race with no finish line. The intelligent person, having recognized this, often seems detached or indifferent to the very things that motivate and excite the majority. This detachment is not a sign of depression, but of a different kind of sight. It is a clarity that comes from seeing the entire game from above, rather than being a frantic player on the board. This perspective, however, inevitably isolates them. Their lack of enthusiasm for conventional prizes of life is interpreted by others as cynicism or aloofness, further widening the gap between them. Schopenhauer famously wrote, "A high degree of intellect tends to make a man unsocial." His reasoning was stark and simple. The more you know, the less you can ignore. The more acutely you perceive the world's flaws, the suffering inherent in existence, and the folly of human ambition, the more difficult it is to find simple, unadulterated joy. For Schopenhauer, intelligence and happiness existed in an inverse relationship. He bleakly concluded that true contentment was a domain of the ignorant, not the wise. This is why some of history's most profound thinkers, from Nietzsche to Kafka to Pascal, were plagued by melancholy, existential dread and a profound sense of loneliness. They were cursed with clarity that stripped away the comforting illusions that make life bearable for most. But Schopenhauer was not merely a purveyor of gloom, he was also a pragmatist. He understood that while intelligence may lead to a form of exile, there were strategies for navigating this predicament. His advice was not to change oneself to fit in, but to change one's environment to fit the nature of the mind. He championed solitude, viewing it not as a punishment to be endured, but as a precious privilege to be cultivated. For the deep thinker, being alone is not being lonely. It is an opportunity to engage in the most meaningful conversation of all, the one with oneself, and with the great minds of history through books. He also advised intelligent people to be highly selective in their social interactions. Instead of wasting energy trying to connect with a society that would never understand them, they should seek out the very few individuals who operate on a similar wavelength. Finding these kindred spirits, whether in person or through the intellectual heritage of philosophy, art, and science, was crucial for staving off complete despair. Finally, he warned against a naive impulse to share one's deepest insights with those who are not prepared to hear them. The wise person, he suggested, learns to observe society, understand its rules, and choose a word with surgical precision, revealing their depth only to those who have earned the right to see it. Schopenhauer philosophy serves as a powerful, if sobering, validation for anyone who has ever felt like an outsider because of their mind. It confirms a suspicion that society doesn't reject intelligence because it's wrong, but because it's right in ways that are deeply unsettling. The deep thinker isn't pushed away because they are flawed. They are pushed away because they reveal the flaws in everything else. They are the ones who see the matrix. And while this vision grants them a certain kind of freedom, it also ensures they will forever be estranged from those who remain comfortably plugged in. The stark reality is that our societies are not structured to reward deep thinking. They are structured to maintain order. The systems that govern our lives, from our schools to our workplaces to our political institutions, are fundamentally conservative entities. Their primary objective is not to foster disruptive genius, but to ensure stability, predictability, and the smooth continuation of the existing power structure. Most people instinctively prefer the comfort of a known truth, even if it is a partial one, to the anxiety of a new, paradigm-shifting idea. This deep-seated preference for cognitive ease is the invisible hand that shapes our world. At its core, the human brain is an efficiency machine. It has evolved to rely on mental shortcuts, or heuristics, to navigate complexities of daily life. This is why psychologists talk about cognitive ease, the brain's inherent preference for information that is simple, familiar, and easy to process. A complex, nuanced, or counterintuitive idea demands more mental energy. It creates friction. The brain perceives this friction as a potential threat, something to be avoided. This biological imperative is the bedrock upon which our social institutions are built. Consider the modern education system. While it pays lip service to nurturing critical thinking, its actual structure often does the opposite. The system is designed to reward conformity and obedience over genuine intellectual curiosity. Students who excel are typically those who are best at memorizing information, regurgitating it on standardized tests, and adhering to the established curriculum without asking too many uncomfortable questions. The student who constantly challenges a teacher, who sees flaws in the textbook's logic, or who wants to explore tangents that deviate from the lesson plan, is often labeled a problem or a disruption. They are punished for the very quality that defines a true intellectual, the refusal to accept information passively. This institutional bias continues into the corporate world. Large organizations, despite their innovation rhetoric, are inherently risk-averse. They are designed to optimize existing processes, not to revolutionize them. The corporate ladder is not typically climbed by the most brilliant or creative employee, but by the one who best navigates a political landscape, conforms to the company culture, and avoids making waves. A truly original thinker, someone who questions a fundamental business model or points out deep, systemic flaws, is often seen as a threat to the established hierarchy. Their ideas, however valuable, introduce a level of uncertainty that the system is designed to eliminate. They are the cultural misfit, the employee who is not a team player. This pattern is perhaps most visible in the realm of politics. The leaders who gain the most traction are rarely the ones who offer nuanced, complex solutions to multifaceted problems. Instead, success often goes to those who can craft simple, emotionally powerful narratives that tell people what they already want to believe. A politician who speaks in terms of hard truths, trade-offs, and uncomfortable realities will almost always lose to one who offers easy answers and a clear, identifiable enemy. Society votes for the story that makes it feel best, not the one that is most accurate. This systemic resistance to depth explains why so many of history's most celebrated intellectuals were considered failures or outcasts in their own time. Their ideas were simply too disruptive for the existing order to accommodate. Society only celebrates genius in retrospect, once its disruptive potential has been safely neutralized and its insights have been absorbed into a new, more stable status quo. Galileo was condemned by the institution of his day for a truth that is now taught to school children. Vincent van Gogh died in poverty, unable to sell his paintings, which are now considered priceless treasures. Nikola Tesla, a man whose mind conjured the future of energy, died broken alone, his most revolutionary idea suppressed by commercial interests. These stories are not anomalies. They are the norm. Society does not embrace the visionary in the present. It canonizes them in the past. It does not reward the mind that challenges its foundations. It waits for the dust to settle and then builds a monument on the new ground. For the deep thinker living today, this historical pattern offers a crucial lesson. The feeling of being misunderstood or unappreciated is not a personal failure. It is the price of admission for seeing the world ahead of curve. You are simply living through the messy, uncomfortable process of change that future generations will one day read about as a moment of celebrated progress. If you have ever felt a sense of alienation for the way you think, you walk in the footsteps of giants. Throughout human history, the minds that have contributed most significantly to our collective progress were not celebrated in their time. They were often condemned. Their crime was not in being wrong, but in being right too soon. They saw a future that their contemporaries were not yet ready to inhabit, and for that vision, they often paid a terrible price. Their stories are not just historical footnotes. They are cautionary tales that reveal a timeless truth about the relationship between genius and society. Consider Socrates, the foundational figure of Western philosophy. He did not write books or build monuments. His entire contribution was to walk the streets of Athens and ask uncomfortable questions. His Socratic method was a relentless intellectual scalpel designed to cut away layers of dogma, assumption, and intellectual laziness. He challenged generals on the nature of courage and politicians on the nature of justice, exposing their confident assertions as little more than unexamined prejudice. But in forcing people to think for themselves, he committed the ultimate social sin. He undermined the authority of the established order. He was not put on trial for his philosophical ideas, but for corrupting the youth and impiety, charges that were simply a legalistic cover for the fact that he made powerful people look foolish. Given the choice between renouncing his principles and drinking poison, he chose the hemlock, and his death became a defining symbol of society's fear of the examined life. Centuries later, Galileo Galilei faced a similar conflict, but his challenger was not the state, but the church, the ultimate authority on truth in his era. Using the newly invented telescope, he gathered empirical evidence that the Earth revolved around the Sun, a discovery that directly contradicted religious scripture and the entire geocentric model of the universe upon which the Church's authority rested. His crime was not one of opinion, but of observation. He was revealing an objective, verifiable truth. But this truth was so profoundly destabilizing to the existing power structure that the institution could not allow it to stand. He was branded a heretic, forced to publicly recant his findings under threat of torture, and spent the final years of his life under house arrest. Galileo's story is a quintessential example of how even the most undeniable truth will be violently rejected if it threatens the institutions that profit from a shared illusion. Friedrich Nietzsche's work was so radical and psychologically unsettling that society in his time had no framework to even begin to understand it. He declared the death of God and argued that conventional morality was a slave morality designed to suppress the strong. He championed the idea of the Übermensch, the individual who transcends societal norms to create their own values. These were not ideas designed to comfort. They were designed to detonate. He was largely ignored, dismissed as a madman, and suffered a complete mental breakdown, dying in obscurity. Yet today, his ideas are foundational to existentialism, psychology, and modern philosophy. Society had to evolve for a century before it could even begin to grapple with the depths of his thought. The tragedy of Nikola Tesla was not one of philosophy, but of practicality. He was a visionary inventor whose mind operated on a plane of existence that few could comprehend. He dreamed of wireless communication, robotics, and, most threateningly, free, limitless energy for all of humanity. But he lived in a world run by industrialists like Thomas Edison and J.P. Morgan, men who were not interested in liberating humanity, but in moneizing it. Tesla's idea of broadcasting free electricity was a direct threat to their business models, which relied on selling copper wire and charging customers for every watt of power used. They systematically discredited him, underfunded his projects, and stole his patents. Tesla, a man who literally invented the modern world, died penniless and forgotten in a hotel room, a perfect monument to society's tendency to reward shrewd capitalists over true visionaries. Perhaps one of the most poignant examples is that of Alan Turing, a brilliant mathematician and the father of theoretical computer science and artificial intelligence. Turing's work as a code breaker at Bletchley Park during World War II was instrumental in defeating the Nazis and saving millions of lives. He was, without exaggeration, a war hero who changed the course of history. Yet, society did not honor him for his monumental contributions. Instead, it persecuted him for his homosexuality. In 1952, he was convicted of gross indecency and forced to undergo chemical castration. 2 years later, at the age of 41, he died by suicide. The society he saved discarded him because his personal life did not conform to its rigid social norms. This pattern is not limited to men. Hypatia of Alexandria, a brilliant philosopher, astronomer, and mathematician in the late Roman Empire, was a beacon of rational thought in a world descending into religious dogmatism. As a woman who dared to teach science and philosophy publicly, she was seen as a profound threat to the rising power of the Christian authorities. In 415 AD, a mob of religious zealots, incited by the local bishop, dragged her from her chariot, brutally murdered her, and burned her body. Her death symbolized the end of classical antiquity's intellectual tradition and the beginning of the Dark Ages. It was a violent, horrifying testament to the fact that intellectual progress is often met with the most brutal forms of resistance. Each of these figures, and countless others like them, shared a common fate. They introduced ideas that were too advanced, too disruptive, or too true for their time. They held up a mirror, and society, horrified by the reflection, chose to shatter it. Their lives serve as a somber reminder that the path of the deep thinker is often a lonely and perilous one. But they also offer a glimmer of hope. While they were punished in their own time, history has ultimately vindicated them. Their once radical ideas are now the bedrock of our civilization. So, if history proves that society is hardwired to resist its greatest minds, what does that mean for you? Are you doomed to a life of quiet desperation and misunderstanding? Absolutely not. It simply means that you must learn to navigate the world with a different kind of wisdom, a strategic intelligence. You cannot expect a world built on conformity to celebrate your nonconformity. Instead, you must learn how to protect your gift and use it wisely. Not every mind is a safe harbor for your deepest thoughts. Learn the art of intellectual triage. Save your most profound and challenging idea for those few people who have proven they are capable of appreciating them. You don't need the validation of the masses. You need a connection of a few kindred spirits. Seek out your tribe. In the past, this was an almost impossible task. Today, through the internet, through books, through niche communities, you have the unprecedented ability to find others who think and feel as you do. These connections are your lifeline. They are the spaces where you will not have to apologize for your depth or simplify your thoughts. They are where you can be fully yourself. At the same time, learn the art of translation. The greatest thinkers were not only brilliant, but they were often great communicators. As Einstein supposedly said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Challenge yourself to distill your complex ideas into a form that others can grasp, not to dumb them down, but to build a bridge between your world and theirs. Remember the words of Schopenhauer: talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see. As a deep thinker, you see the targets that are invisible to others. This will always make some people uncomfortable. It will always be a lonely position to occupy. But do not for a moment believe that this means you should stop thinking, stop questioning, or stop seeing. Society desperately needs its deep thinkers, even if it doesn't know it. It needs its outliers, its visionaries, and its heretics to save it from its own complacency. You are part of a long and noble lineage of minds that have pushed humanity forward, kicking and screaming, into a better future. In the end, the path of the deep thinker is a difficult one, fraught with misunderstanding and isolation. It is a journey that requires immense courage and self-reliance. But it is also a path of profound meaning and incredible freedom. You are not rejected because you are broken. You are resisted because you are powerful. Society may fear the mirror you hold, but it is in that very reflection that the seeds of progress are found. It is the deep thinkers who, time and again, have dragged the world into the light. If this exploration of the deep thinker's journey resonated with you, let us know your own experiences in the comments. Have you ever felt that sense of rejection for thinking differently? By sharing our stories, we can begin to build the very community that society often denies us. If you want to continue exploring the insight from history's greatest and most misunderstood minds, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We are just beginning to scratch the surface. Remember, they may not understand you now, but history will.